tell me where in the world is
Crime in San Diego.
Welcome back to Where in the World is Crime in San Diego.
Welcome back. Happy Tuesday.
Feels good to be back. I know last week we dropped Frozen in Time, and we had some technical difficulties with our audio being picked up with our mics, and it's just like, we're still young.
we're still learning.
Sometimes we learn to walk before we learn to crawl. And there's certain steps that we forget. And it's just like, oh my gosh. So I apologize. That was my fault. So I fixed it.
But then we also dropped a bonus episode for Star Wars. So that should have made up a little bit for that.
Yeah. May the 4th be with you. I mean, that was all your idea. And I was just like, oh, all right, cool. I like this.
Join the festivities. Obviously, because we're still learning, our editing takes a little bit longer with our YouTube. So thank you guys for being patient. We are working on getting better with our timing. We also want to make sure that we're putting out something that we're proud of. So thank you guys for being patient.
Oh, totally.
Bottom line.
Exactly. And that's what it is. I want to make sure that we get our stuff correct first and foremost, and that it sounds good. So, yeah. But it's a new week and we have a new case for you guys.
Before we start, just a reminder, it's a broken record, but please like, share, follow our page. It helps us out more than you guys know. So please, if you're subscribed to our YouTube or if you're checking us out for the first time, like, follow, subscribe, all the above. Thank you. Thank you.
Greatly appreciated. And keep it going. Keep spreading the word. We love doing this. We love hearing your guys' DMs. So with that being said, I looked up this case that we are going to discuss with you guys today. And, I wanted to have it be more on the lighter side. Oh, our sign for that. I wanted it to be more on the lighter side. And it's something that I was like, oh my gosh, this happened here in San Diego in Southern California. And it was amazing, honestly. Like, I was like, wow, this is like kind of like modern day, like Robin Hood, but without giving to the poor and just keeping it.
Robin Hood without the Robin Hood. Got it.
Yes. You know what I'm saying. But who are we talking about today? Well, we don't know who we're talking about today necessarily because this person has still been unidentifiable.
I think this is the first for us where it's not just unsolved, but there's like no clue as to like even a suspect in mind.
We have no idea. Your guess is as good as ours. So this week's episode is called The Geezer Bandit.
Ooh. Our disclaimers for this week are robbery, gun violence, and fraud. And our sources are quite a bit, so hang with me. CBSA, San Diego Union Tribune, Wikipedia, FBI.gov, ABC 10, Facebook.com, Escondido Grapevine, the Bakersfield Californian, LATimes.com, News Times San Luis Obispo.
Wow,
that was a mouthful.
That was quite a bit. And because we're going to introduce to you guys what eventually has been known as the Geezer Bandit. Now, this name was given to this person by the FBI. And it is a person who committed robberies in Southern California, all the way from San Luis Obispo down to San Diego, from the years of 2009 to 2011. Now, the FBI worked with local law enforcement throughout California, from San Luis Obispo, Temecula, which would be Riverside County, San Diego County, and to try to get this person. The Geezer Bandit was even listed on America's Most Wanted in October 2010, which, I mean, if you're on that prestigious list, you've had to have done something pretty major to get yourself on there.
Oh, yeah, you caused some ruckus.
Exactly. So, let's go into what the description of the Geezer Bandit. And this is really funny because it's like, geezers are like, it's like a word for like an elderly person, right?
Isn't it like a UK slang term?
That I'm not sure. Is it really?
I think it's like a British slang term.
Is it really? Okay. So that's what the origin of it
If
is.
anybody knows, please let us know. But I'm pretty sure.
That's where it's come from.
Yeah. If I were to bet on it.
Okay. Well, so this person is suspected to be a white male in the age of 70, 60 years age range, right? Is somewhere between 5'10" and 6 foot, kind of between a 190, 200 pound build. So someone that's not necessarily like overbearing like a weightlifter, but someone that's, you know what, has a bit of a frame to themselves.
Yeah, it doesn't sound too fragile.
Exactly. And this is, you know, judging from footage that was collected and, you know, trying to match them when you walk through a door, you can see that, okay, this person's about 6 foot or 5 something and whatnot, right? Now, let's go back to the robberies. The very first robbery was here in San Diego in August of 2009. And the Geezer Bandit had a tendency of repeating the same things over and over again when he was committing these robberies. The Geezer Bandit...
Like verbally? Like repeating himself?
It was either repeating himself or either just the same, like the same outline. He was coming into the bank. He was wearing, you know, kind of old-fashioned clothes, like glasses, coats. He was always covered, always wore pants, always looked like he was dressed elderly, if that makes sense. He would go into the bank like a normal customer. When he approached the teller, he would sometimes have like a leather case or like a journal, a binder.
Which most old people do because it's just like a mindset organization thing.
But in his hands, and would be like a journal, binder, suitcase, whatever, was a revolver that he would pull out from his case.
Most old people don't have that.
Mm-hmm. And he would demand money from the teller by handing them a note. So he would first hand the note to the teller, put the briefcase, journal, whatever it was, on the countertop, and pull out the revolver to show the teller, hey, I mean business. And then most tellers are like, okay, you know, you've had experience with this, where you're a teller, and when you were told,
unfortunately,
yeah. So it's like when someone demands money, you just listen to their commands, correct?
Oh yeah, for sure.
So yeah, like this was what his
your fight or flight comes out.
Yeah, and from a teller who directly had contact with the Geezer Bandit, it's quoted that the note said, "Give me $50,000 or I will murder you." That is scary. Yeah. And it could be anyone. It could be a young person. It could be an elderly person. When you hear something like that, you take that threat seriously. You don't try to laugh it off because, hey, geez.
Yeah, you don't know what someone's capable of. Exactly.
Yeah. Now, we jumped to a teller that was from San Luis Obispo, Melissa Teixeira. And she's quoted to say where he had a note, like on a small piece of torn paper is what she quoted.
Okay.
And she came face to face with the Geezer Bandit in Morro Bay. So this is all right there at the Heritage Oaks Banks.
Okay.
All right. She was one of the two tellers in that bank. Her coworker was next to her as the Geezer Bandit showed the note and he showed the revolver. So he got the attention of both tellers. And he said, "Give me both of your drawers. I don't want any dye packs, or I'll come back for you."
Oh, shoot. So he already knew that they could have tried.
Mm-hmm.
Like he was kind of warning, like, don't even think about trying something. Just
don't even think about no funny business. I know what you guys are capable of, like doing dye packs, and you know you'll make my day ruined or whatever. But by this point, he already had a string of robberies, and he was already getting known by this point when he did this specific robbery in Morro Bay. Um, but the one thing that really stood out to Melissa is that she's quoted, "I know he was wearing a mask. When he first came in, the color of his face seemed very off. It almost seemed waxy. I noticed that there was a circular hole on his ear, and it was in the center, and then that's when I realized it was a mask." Now, if you're thinking to yourself, this doesn't make any sense. Well, because law enforcement throughout all these agencies in Southern California started having these theories and these possibilities of that, you know what? The Geezer Bandit isn't actually a geezer. It's actually someone impersonating to be elderly.
When you said mask, my head went to face masks. So I was like, what's the shocking part about this? I forget we're pre-COVID. My bad.
This is pre-COVID.
My bad.
We're like 9 years before COVID, okay?
That's actually really smart.
So, exactly. And that's when they came up with the theory that, you know what, this could be like a silicone / like Hollywood style, like headgear mask.
Yeah, like prosthetic makeup.
Exactly. That's exactly what they were thinking. And the FBI started questioning all these special effect, studios in Southern California, and even to these shops that would sell the special type of makeup and special type of masks, and they would get subpoenas to be like, "Who have you sold your products to? We need a list." And they were just going down the list of all of these agencies, which is insane to even think of.
That's a lot of manpower to go through that list.
Yes. Because the reason why they also brought up this theory is that there was a actual incident where a person in East Asia was able to board a plane from Hong Kong to Canada wearing an elderly looking mask, which is insane.
Like, did they steal somebody's identity, or how do you?
Well, that's a good question. I wasn't really able to figure out exactly what it was pertaining, but essentially it's you had a young man pretending to be elderly on the flight, and they realized that he was wearing a prosthetic or a silicone mask over his face. Now you're looking at from Hong Kong to Canada, that's at least a minimum 12-hour flight. I mean, you're in a like sweating and like.
Well, not only that, people pay so much money in Botox to look younger. What are the benefits of being older?
Well, maybe he was being falsifying his identity to try to maybe escape the country, or who knows? Or I mean,
there's like misguiding people.
There's endless a bunch of questions that we could always ask for, but the thing is that someone trying to pretend to be someone else was capable of doing that. So, I mean, there's a list of banks that the Geezer Bandit robbed. There was a total of 16 from August 28, 2009 to December 2nd in 2011. And they range all the way from Santee, San Diego, Rancho Santa Fe, Vista, Poway, Temecula, Bakersfield, all the way down up to San Luis Obispo.
Was it only one type of bank, or was it like a variation of like?
So you had like U.S. Bank, you had Bank of America, California Bank and Trust, Wells Fargo. I mentioned the Heritage one up in Morro Bay. Mm-hmm. So there wasn't one specific.
It was like a variation of
there
banks.
Was variations. There were some that were staggered. Like there were ones that were like almost a week and a half apart. There were some that were like a month apart. And then it's kind of like Point Break, where Keanu Reeves and Patrick Swayze, like they dress as president. You went off the top of your head. But anyways, Point Break, the presidents steal money from banks, and it's during the summer, and during the winter they don't steal banks. Anyways, moving on. So let's jump into the very last known robbery of the Geezer Bandit, which was December 2nd, 2011 in San Luis Obispo. The Geezer Bandit, after this December 2nd robbery, everything just came to a standstill. Everything just kind of suddenly stopped. And the reason why is because Around 5:40 in the afternoon, the Geezer Bandit walks into the bank in San Luis Obispo. He approaches the teller, same routine. He was carrying what was described as a day planner, and he has his like little fedora root looking hat with glasses. His face looks, like a geezer, old elderly person. And he does the same thing that he does. He hands a note to the teller demanding for cash, and out of his planner, he pulls out the revolver. So the teller agrees. But what the teller didn't, mention was that he or she was able to sneak in a die pack into the actual stash of money that he was requesting. Once the transaction's done, the robber, the Geezer Bandit, steps out of the bank, and then this is where almost immediately the die pack explodes. Yes. Now, I've never seen a video of a die pack. I always figured it would be like that ink. It just goes everywhere, correct? And the money's wasted or whatever. But with this one, it's a little different because there's an actual surveillance video of where you see the Geezer Bandit walk out of the bank after making the robbery, and then it's like a plume of smoke in his bag because he had it in the bag in the planner, and it just goes poof, like there's dust, there's red dust everywhere, and then the public around was just like, whoa, what's going on? And they see an elderly person that's just like, oh my gosh, he's on the floor or whatever, And as they approach him, guess what happens? The Geezer Bandit gets up. He doesn't walk away. He sprints away like Forrest Gump.
He must have forgot that he was supposed to limp or walk really slow.
Exactly. So you see that. What goes through your head that you see an elderly person just
he gave away his age.
Exactly.
There's no way an old person, I take that back. There are older people that are very fit. For the majority, if you're going in there and you're hobbling and walking really slow and you need your glasses, I wouldn't expect you to be able to take off like an Olympic runner.
Exactly. So furthermore, after that surveillance video of the die pack exploding and then the Geezer Bandit just getting up and running away from the scene, just furthermore clarifies that the geezer is not a geezer. It's a personator, and it's actually someone that's younger, someone maybe in their 20s to 40 years of age. Which is wow. But get this. So while all this was happening, the geezer did drop his planner and he left it behind. He did take the revolver with him. And there's reports of witnesses seeing that the geezer, the elderly person, got into a BMW across the street and then just sped off. And that's it. Into the night. Which is wow.
Was there anything in the day planner, like an ID or a checkbook or?
So with all that stuff and going on, obviously by this time, the FBI knew about the Geezer Bandit because they are the ones that were labeled him as the Geezer Bandit, and they collected evidence from all of his robberies previously. Right. And they collected the planner and they tried to investigate it for fingerprints or any kind of clues onto the identity of who is behind the mask. So, and that's what they actually did. They collected all the evidence in January 11, and he was profiled to be, on the top 10 or America's Most Wanted.
In 2011, right?
In 2011, sorry, yes.
That's insane.
Yeah. And it is one wild story.
I feel bamboozled.
Oh, I feel too. And it's crazy because, in 2011, he's already had a good enough following of robberies. So it's people are either scared or people are either fascinated by it. And it's just I remember hearing his name in the newscasts, in the news reports, the Geezer Bandit strikes again, the Geezer Bandit.
I had never heard of it.
Never.
No. I have no recollection of it being a thing or a trend or anything. But I did read that he had like Facebook followings and he had like people making t-shirts. It was actually like a funny slogan. It said, Geezer Bandit is my name. Getting away is my game.
It's wild. Like, I mean, so much has happened since his last robbery appearance in 2011. Like, it's insane.
So this is where I went down my rabbit hole.
Okay, so what you got?
So the Geezer Bandit has since been compared to a person from 1971 known as D.B. Cooper, aka Dan Cooper. So Dan Cooper was a man who boarded a flight from Portland to Seattle.
Okay. Yeah.
So they're mid-flight, and you know how the flight attendants are going like up and down, like checking if you need anything. He pulls one aside and he lets her know, I have a bomb in my briefcase. I want $200,000, which back in 1971 was a lot of money. Mm-hmm. Today it would be about like 1.3 million, more or less.
It's a huge jump.
That's a lot of money.
And like 50-year difference. Yeah.
He also says that when they land in Seattle, he wants 4 parachutes.
4 parachutes. He's by himself, though.
Yeah, that's like the weirdest request.
Mm-hmm.
So they land in Seattle. They let all the passengers off safely, but he keeps the crew with him.
Oh, like he still kept them as hostages.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Okay.
So he gives them instructions and he's like, okay, they give him the money. He says, okay, I need you guys to refuel the plane. We're going to go on another flight. And it almost sounds like he did have it planned out because he like literally gave them like very specific instructions. So he says, we're going to fly to Mexico City. We're going to stop in Reno to refuel. And then we'll be able to make I don't even know how long that flight is. But he basically like already had it like the roadmap for them.
Mm-hmm.
So after like a whole evening of like obviously the FBI being involved and not really knowing how to handle this because it's a hijacking. Back in the 70s, they weren't super common.
It's probably the first of its kind.
Not the first, but it was definitely like a shock.
A pioneer one. Yeah.
So they finally take off again around like 7:40 p.m. They're back in air. And they're, about 30 minutes into the flight. And all of a sudden he tells the flight attendant that he wants to know how to open the staircase. And that's not something that ever really happens on, like, that's a big no-no on a flight.
Yes.
So she gets nervous and she's like, well, like, she goes back, she asks, like, do I do it? Do I not do it? Like, what am I supposed to do? So obviously everybody's like, well, he has a bomb. Like, just do whatever he says. So she tells him, okay, I'll open it, but you have to promise that you either take the bomb with you or disarm it before you leave. And he's like, okay. He's like, I will either disarm it or take it. Like, depends on like what I can do.
Mm-hmm.
So he sits back there by himself. Like he has the parachute. She gets scared because it gets really loud. Obviously, like there's a lot of wind coming in and it's not safe. Mm-hmm. So she goes to the cockpit and she's like, I just want to be as far away from him. Like, I don't know what's happening. So obviously everybody stays up at the front and he's back there by himself. The tail of the plane is like doing its own thing. And about like between 10 to 15 minutes later, they feel that the tail of the plane like almost like wants to lose course. Like, wait.
Yeah.
So it's estimated that somewhere within that time where like the wind was getting too aggressive or like they were turning somewhere, that he jumps out into the darkness in the night somewhere over Washington.
This is so wild because I do remember hearing this as a kid, this specific story, but I just don't remember the actual details. And it just sounds like it just came out of a movie.
That was my thought. I was like, this sounds like something Tom Cruise would reenact.
It's like the scene of like The Dark Knight Rises at the start of the movie where they hijack the plane because it's like Bane. Oh my God.
I feel like we're gonna have to do a movie night.
Ugh.
That's separate.
It's literally like this straight out of a freaking movie. That's how wild this thing is. And it's just like, whew, just goes out in the wind with this briefcase of money and bomb, whatever. Oh my God.
And keep in mind, this is like 8 p.m. in like Washington. Like it's pitch black dark.
Yeah, his darkness.
He has a parachute. He doesn't have a flashlight. He's not exactly like trained or equipped for at least as far as they know. So the way they were able to find out his name or at least eliminate is because they went through the roster of everybody on the plane or the passengers, and he was the only one unaccounted for.
Process of elimination. There you
But
go.
again, there was no way to actually identify him because he paid with cash.
Yeah.
So at that time, I think you just filled out a slip with your information and like paid and got on their way.
Yeah, it's kind of like a guest list registry for a hotel.
Yeah, like it wasn't very like strict.
That's wild.
So as you remember, he got the ransom when they landed in Seattle. And this happened in 1971. In 1980, this is a play on words, but they found part of the ransom in the river banks of the Columbia River. No, just me? Okay. I thought it was cute. Anyways, they found part of the money.
That one went over my head.
Which kind of signaled that he didn't spend it all, or maybe like he was around there at some point.
It's wild because there's so many theories. There's so many like, did he survive? Because when you're flying out of like one of those giant planes, like you're going too fast to even potentially even survive jumping out of a plane.
Not only that, like they were flying over like tends to have, or I mean, Washington has a lot of wooded areas
Exactly.
and like middle of nowhere. And if you're flying in the plane, you're usually not like right above civilization. So
Yeah.
he had no way of marking where he was even going to land.
Yeah. He's just a stick in the wind.
But obviously the FBI became obsessed with finding this person. They did lots of composite sketches. They started to study the plane. They went over that list a million times. They tried to track the money, which is how they realized that this money was part of that same ransom or payout. And for 45 years, this case stayed alive on the FBI's list. And in 2016 is when they finally suspended it. They didn't even close it. They just kind of leave it as like, if it ever gets solved, cool. But at this point, we can't dedicate anymore.
Yeah. It's just more of like, you know what? We've put too much resources into this. Let's just call it a day.
But it was labeled the Northwest hijacking.
Wow.
And same, they say that at this point, they don't believe that he ever survived that because of the darkness, the inexperience, the no like marking of the location, and the fact that the money never came up as like being used anywhere, at least from what they were tracking. So, but I mean, there's tons of theories online of what could have happened to him or who it could be or like
You know
how
what?
you would go about that.
You know what comes into mind?
What?
Kansas, dust in the wind.
Again,
I
no.
don't know that song. I got more.
Anybody?
Okay.
No.
No. All we are is dust in the wind. Okay. So, what about the Geezer Bandit?
Hold on, before we go there. Because of this hijacking, we had a lot of changes in aviation.
Okay.
This was the first case to date that is still unsolved of a hijacking since commercial aviation started.
Wow.
So this one's like definitely in the history books.
Wow.
But
That's crazy. Okay.
since then, obviously airports got much stricter.
Yes, they have.
Anybody that paid in cash got like scrutinized as to why you're paying in cash. They started to get tighter on identities and they implemented metal detectors.
Okay.
So I would have never thought that it was connected to this, but it's pretty interesting that it is.
Yeah.
And in some planes, they installed, or they believe the term is retrofitted, the Boeing 727s, which was the type of plane that he was on, with something called a Cooper vane, which is basically a safety mechanism that won't let the staircase open midair to avoid that ever happening again.
A Cooper vane.
Cooper vane.
Wow. They named something after him.
Yeah, I don't know if that
wow.
proves the point of like, don't do that again.
That's wow.
But it did diminish the amount of hijackings after that. Like after 1973, the hijackings became much less common.
Wow.
Up until 2011, obviously.
That's
I
crazy.
mean, 2001, but
Yeah. 2001 was a different story. That's right.
yeah. But how crazy is that?
That is wild.
This
That
is like a
interesting.
2-in-1 case because I went down my own rabbit hole where I was like, what in the world?
Exactly.
And I wonder what he wanted to do in Mexico City.
I think, like you said, I think he had it all planned out that he was saying it as he was using that as a scapegoat. to be like, hey, you know what? This is where I'm going to go, and this is where the authorities are going to find me. But he had it planned out that he was going to bail ship mid-flight.
Bail ship. Bail plane. Yeah.
Bail plane. He bailed out.
So since then, the Geezer Bandit was compared to Cooper. And I think it's because like the level of intellect that was put into this scheme that was probably compared to.
Yeah.
And obviously this inspired a lot of Geezer Bandit copycats to try and replicate it.
Yes.
Fortunately, someone that did try to replicate it was not as careful in their getaway, and they ended up getting caught. So because they got caught, the cops were automatically like, oh no, this isn't the Geezer Bandit. He's much smarter than this. Like, this can't be him.
Wow.
So obviously after that, he's never been identified. Which is kind of crazy to think that he might like just be walking around you or like your neighbor living next to you. Who knows?
Are you the Geezer Bandit?
I'm not that smart. I'm going to agree with the FBI. I'm not that smart. So federal statute of limitations for robbing a bank, which I am so offended at this law, is 5 years.
Wait. So you're saying that if I rob a bank today and if I get away with it, and then
if you can avoid getting captured for 5 years, you'll never get charged.
Wow.
Considering that bank robbery is a federal crime, that's a really low statute of limitations.
So that's the federal.
That's federal. California tends to think that that's a little too low, and I'm glad.
Oh, so like what? Like 10 years?
No. That's a lot of faith in California. 6 years. You know, just an extra 12 months on that clock. So I've seen a meme going around online, and I'll share it on our Instagram, where it says like, oh, taking out a mortgage is 30 years commitment, but robbing a bank, you'll be out in 10. And I thought it was a joke, but now learning this, I'm like, no, they're serious. Bank robberies aren't as, I guess, like,
they don't happen as much anymore.
No, not only that, but like I thought it was much more punishable than just like a couple years in jail, or like, oh, okay, well, we're only going to chase him for 5 years and then we're done.
It kind of seems like you get locked up behind bars for fraud longer.
Not only that, like we've heard other cases where like, you know, a drug charge that's like 13 years, but robbing a bank is 5?
That's wild.
Yeah.
It's like nothing. That's chump change. It's like,
I am
5 years.
Shocked.
Shook it to the core.
Yes.
Wow. But definitely for sure. The Geezer Bandit, man. Jeez. Kudos to him, honestly. I mean, and
if he was 20 in 2011, 20 to 25, maybe 30, he would be around 30s or 40s right now.
Definitely.
Do you know how much he made out with?
That I couldn't find. They would not disclose that. But I mean, I'm assuming banks that
16 banks though. That's got to add up.
Yeah, but I mean, in your drawer, like how much would you have?
Well, I didn't get into banking until around 2012, 2013. Somewhere between like 5 to 7
grand, $5,000 to $7,000.
Sometimes less. Sometimes you'd have anywhere from like $10 to $2,000. Like it just depended on the day of the week.
Wow.
If there was a shipment coming in, obviously you had a lot more. Or if it was like beginning of the month or paydays where you need to have more. But some days people would come in and it's like, ooh, we ran out of cash, which I know sounds ridiculous. But then I went to McDonald's and they ran out of ketchup and I was like, oh, it does happen.
Apples to oranges.
I'm just saying, it's like going to Starbucks and be like, oh, you're out of coffee. It's like the one thing you come here for, but it happens.
Wow, that is interesting. Well, kudos to the Geezer Bandit who got away and will be away forever because they will not indict this person, whoever the impersonator is. And it's just like, wow.
But I have heard of cases where like someone commits a crime like this and like years later they got a little too lippy and told one too many people. And then it comes back and they get identified. Even if he can't be prosecuted, I do feel that maybe someday we will learn the identity.
Let's hope so. It'd be interesting. Now we've reached the end of our episode, and we have our SBS of the week.
Small Business Spotlight.
Now, last weekend, we met up with our good friend Miggy and his significant other, and we went for a good dinner.
You guys might remember that name from our Valentine's special that we did.
The Killer Couples.
Yes.
And and we met up in Carlsbad, downtown Carlsbad, for dinner at this ramen place. And oh my gosh, I felt like I time travel, not necessarily time, I warped traveled to Japan into like an anime like ramen shop. Like that is, in shortest terms, the way that I can describe my experience at our place.
It was awesome. It was very authentic. The service was amazing. It felt very small business, which is what I love to feel when we go to these places.
Yeah. And who are we talking about?
Gonzo.
And oh my gosh, like I loved it from right from the start. We got in line for our food, and the owner, the wife of and it's a married couple. The wife of the owner of the shop. Can I help you?
Very welcoming.
Yes, it was so nice. It was so different. Yeah. And at first I was just like, oh, who is this person? Like,
they have like the lanterns for lighting. It's like not too dark, but not too bright. It just, the whole ambience is just like right on point.
Yeah. And then the food was amazing. I didn't want any like ramen soup. I wanted, because that day I went to the baseball game. So I wanted something kind of lighter, but I ended up getting like the chicken and a rice bowl.
Yeah.
And oh my gosh, it was
the
yummy.
Popcorn chicken was so good.
And then you had the miso soup.
I had the miso ramen. It was delicious. I normally don't like ramen, so this one for me was like we'll try it. I'm going to take one for the team. Let's do this.
Yes.
And I ended up like slurping my dinner because it was so delicious.
Which, by the way, slurping in Japan means it's a compliment. I did not know that.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So when you're eating and you're slurping and it's like it's a compliment. It's not rude. It's not offensive. It's actually more like,
oh, good, because it was meant as a compliment.
And then after we had our food, we talked, and it was closing time, and we actually got a chance to kind of talk to the owner. I forgot her name. What was her name, Angie?
I know it's gonna bother me,
but we were like, hey, we would love to feature you on our podcast, please. And we gave her our business card, and
she was so excited. She was so excited that we left her restaurant. She was excited that we wanted to talk about them.
And she's like, oh, you do a small business shout outs. It's like, oh, well, do us. It's like, that's what this card is for.
Like, yeah, it's right here.
So please go check out Gonzo in downtown Carlsbad. You're not going to want to miss out on this place. They're amazing. We will drop their Instagram handles, their information on our show notes and all over our social medias, but please go check them out for sure.
I'm going to share the pictures of our food because it's delicious. And it's also rated one of the top 100 restaurants in San Diego on Yelp, which is a huge success because
yes,
normally people on Yelp are kind of mean. But yeah, no. But definitely go check it out. Let us know if you try it. Let us know what you think. Let us know what you try. If you tried something different than what we did, I'd love to hear it. But we're definitely going back there.
Totally agree. And yeah, keep sending us your guys' small business shout outs. If you guys have a specific case you want us to investigate and share for everyone, for our listeners, we're all ears. We totally in for it. We're totally all for whatever you guys want for us to investigate. I'm down for it.
Yeah, it's really fun. If you have a case, you're welcome to DM us, or we have a Google form up on our link that you can fill out and let us know. Don't forget to like, share, follow, and subscribe. Make sure to tune in every Monday for our next case of Where in the World is Crime in San Diego? Till then, catch us on the next case.
And in case we don't see you, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.
Tell me where in the world is
Crime in San Diego.